What is going on, everybody? Hope everybody's doing fantastic. Who do we have here? Hey, sir. I have a
Hello.
Mr. Brodie Perkins. How's everybody going? Brodie, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Perfect.
Hi, Ian. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing? Awesome. Well, everybody, welcome back to another Industry Spotlight. Today we have some fantastic stuff about toys, some collectibles, toys. Lots of toy stuff today, I think. Right, Brodie?
Toys and facts about life. Yeah.
Perfect. So, but before we get into it, real quick, what we would like to do, so every Tuesday we are going live here. We pretty much go live every day here on this channel, but specifically every Tuesday we go live, and we usually have industry spotlights or ZBC breakdowns. But right now, what we have going on is we have next week we have basically an Ask ZBrush Live. And Ask ZBrush Live with me and Mr. Paul Gabry. We're going to be taking your questions live next week. So if you guys have questions about ZBrush, you've submitted, your Twitter questions to the hashtag Ask ZBrush, and you would like to see a video or like to know if that is all possible, come join us next Tuesday. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be a lot of fun. But that's going to be going on next Tuesday. But without further ado, we're going to go back to a Brodie Perkins because that's who we're here to talk about. And you do some amazing toys. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where do you work? What do you do? And why are you so awesome at it?
Well, I work at for the wonderful company NECA. I've been working there full time since last September. So almost a year, coming up on a year, which is kind of hard to believe.
Wow.
Before then, I was freelance for years and years and years, and I worked with them through by those means as well, and a bunch of other companies. Yeah, that's me right now. I'm pretty much all NECA all day long, working on Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles toys.
Ooh, that's really cool. I know for sure. Like, I love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I know I'm sure there's a ton of people who also love Teenage Mutant Turtles. A buddy of mine's super into it, so I'll have to tell him. You have hands on that. So very cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and share Brodie's screen. And just remember that if you guys have questions about toys, or more specifically, how you can get into the industry, thoughts, questions, anything related to ZBrush, feel free to ask away because Brodie here is willing to volunteer his time to come in and answer those questions as best as he can. So let's go to get into it. What's this first piece that you have on the screen? And
well, this was Chrome Dome. This is one of the nemesis of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was in the cartoon from the 80s. One of the things that we're doing that not a lot of toy companies do is we're really digging and getting a lot of more, not that he's really obscure, but we do tend to go a lot further than, or we have gone a lot further than the kind of the initial main lineup and the normal kind of good guys and bad guys that you might see from other toy companies. And this is one of them. And this one's just to kind of show that, I was proud of how this guy came out. He's a really big, I have him somewhere, but he's a really big character. He turned out, he turned into a really substantial figure. And, he moves really well. His articulation's great. Yeah, he just came out really nice. So I just had him up just to kind of show him off a little bit. Definitely a highlight as far as the stuff that I've done for NECA for me so far.
That's awesome. Well, we got our first question. You ready for it?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So what kind of tolerances do you factor in when you're making cuts for articulation?
Tolerances. What are no, I'm just kidding.
We just eyeball here. Come on.
I'm probably not the best at that sort of thing as far as really because almost everything I do is I kind of wing it. I look at the joint and just being familiar with toys and sort of my own preferences. I know when I open a box and I get a toy out, if I see that the pin in the elbow pin is like that small, I'm worried that it's going to break. I'm worried it's going to snap.
Yeah.
So when I create mine, when I do my articulation, I just make them a little beefier. I just kind of eyeball it. I just kind of, try to make sure that there's enough there for the joints to bite into, to hold into, and that it's going to have enough thickness in the material so that it won't crack or anything like that. But we also, we work with a lot of, it's not, no toy is a one-man job. So I do my bit, and then I send it to my guys, and then they look it over and they tell me, this looks wonky or this looks off. Can we fatten this up? Can we thin it out more? And then the factories from there kind of run with it. So
yeah. Would you
but
say
I don't bust out any kind of measuring tool or anything and make sure that it's a certain,
that makes sense. So would you say it's more about maybe, like, especially for anybody who's new trying to get into articulation, it's more about just understanding what the articulation is and how it operates so that they can apply that to the toy?
Yeah, and just kind of what you want it to do. If you need it to bend a certain way, then it's a lot of people are going to move the character that way a lot, especially. Then you got to make sure that the joints and articulation are going to hold up to that. And
yeah.
And I only kind of learned about it just from experience, just from doing it again and again and again, and being told I was wrong a lot. And now I get told that I'm wrong a little less, basically.
That's fair. Yep, you're doing. Nope. Okay, yep, you're doing great. Perfect. Yeah. No, that's awesome. How did you learn articulation? Like, I know it's a big topic. A lot of people love it. How did you get started into it? How many toys did you rip? And why Batman?
It was kind of honestly, the way I learned articulation was my very first toy. The very first job I got was with this company called Four Horsemen Toy Studios. And if you're in the toy world, you know who they are. They do jobs for like Mattel and Super 7, and they've done tons of stuff. They're really big in the He-Man, the Masters of the Universe world. Great guys. They gave me my first shot into the industry when I had no idea what I was doing. They knew I was a 3D guy and I had a pretty decent portfolio, but I had no articulation in it because I didn't know how to do articulation. And then when they asked me if I could do the job, I basically lied and said yes.
Which we advise you not to do.
Yeah,
that's funny. That's funny.
Well, and to my defense, I didn't really realize that when we talked about it, to back up a little, the way it all kind of went down was, I went to Comic-Con, Comic-Con for the first time. Mm-hmm. And when I walked in the doors, I knew nothing about Comic-Con other than it was huge, had comic books, and there's a lot of people dressed up as superheroes. That's about as much as I knew about it. I'm a big comic book fan, but I just never been to something like San Diego Comic-Con. Mm-hmm. And the first time I went there, I walked in the doors and I realized that this is the biggest job fair for people like me or anyone that's kind of wanting to do collectibles, or there's even some game companies there. There's studios like Marvel and DC and Warner Brothers. I mean, and unlike a lot of the smaller comic book conventions, when you go to a booth, you're not just talking to some volunteer for the weekend who's handing out flyers. A lot of times you're talking to art directors and you're talking to managers. You're talking to people that are actually doing the work and actually responsible for the product, and they're looking for people that can do the job. And so when I realized that, I went home and I was already kind of getting into sculpting. I had been an animator prior, a struggling animator. I was very much the struggling animator. And when people talk about struggling artist, I was the struggling animator. I tried for years and years to make it as an animator. And then ZBrush came along, and I kind of I just kind of shifted all my focus to sculpting, because that was the one kind of avenue that I always struggled with. I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting about the screensaver. I don't know how to turn it off.
Oh, just go up to preferences, screensaver. And you can knock that off. You can.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Also, too, real quick, while you're talking about it for a second, can you actually show us a little bit of articulation while you're going?
Yeah. I think this guy has it set up still.
Yeah. Really curious to see what this looks like broken up.
Yeah. Fortunately, I don't have it it's not connected, like the wrist isn't connected to the forearm, but you know, something like this.
Yeah.
You can see where the pinhole would be. So I
Yeah,
put in a
that's
rotation on my pins. So he gets about a little over 90 just from that. And since it's a double, he can almost touch his shoulder, you know, almost. So if I click
Yeah.
to shift to that. Yeah, so that one's not set up for that. Let's see this guy over here. Yeah, there we go.
That's perfect. While you're on, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So you kind of see how that would go to there. So if you'd imagine, he would be about here with the forearm. So pretty good, like pretty good range for this guy.
Yeah.
This guy, we were lucky just jumping around a little bit, but we were kind of lucky, or I was lucky, I guess, with this guy, because a lot of the stuff that we sculpt doesn't really lend itself to incredibly high levels of articulation.
Mm-hmm.
With this guy, just his body form was such kind of normal humanoid shape. There wasn't a lot of things, you know, protruding, or, you know, it was almost like a Marvel Legends figure in a sense. You can just kind of pack a bunch of articulation in, and he moves pretty great. And that's generally not the case. Usually we have to work around a lot of, you know, design elements and hope that we can get 90 degrees and hope that, you know, without destroying the sculpt too much. But
yeah, preservation's king, especially when you want the likeness of the sculpt and you want to make sure that it looks like the thing.
The struggle.
Yeah. How many?
But anyway, yeah. So Comic-Con, big thing. Came back with a lot of with my portfolio the year after, with a bunch of sculpts, and I interviewed with, like, I had met some people the year before, and I interviewed with like Hasbro and Lego and all these different companies. And then during, I think it was my interview with Hasbro, I had my cell phone on the table, which I wouldn't recommend you do during an interview. But I had it on the table, and as they're looking at my portfolio, I got a text from my wife, who was there with me, and she was over at the Four Horsemen's booth, and they asked her why I hadn't talked to them about working with them. And at the time, you know, not all the toy companies were digital. Like Four Horsemen wasn't digital, NECA wasn't digital at the time. They were all traditional at the time.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of companies were still doing it the traditional way. So I never even thought about approaching them. And so I went to, right after that interview, I went and talked to them. I showed them my sculpts, and they were like, yeah, this is great. You know, Mattel, one of their biggest clients at the time, is moving to all digital. So they needed to move to all digital, and they needed someone who knew how to do digital. And I had just purchased a 3D printer. And at the time, it was a MakerBot. You know, you couldn't get a $300 resin printer off Amazon at the time. You had to spend like $3,000 and get a MakerBot or something like that. And I had one of those, and I had literally printed out like a statue that I kind of didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew enough to break it apart. Mm-hmm. And I guess they thought that was good. All right, good enough, I guess. You know, or heading in the right direction. So yeah, they told me they would hire me. So I was real excited, and I honestly thought that I thought it was gonna be like next month. I thought, like, you know, Comic-Con would wrap up, and then a couple weeks later I'd get a call. Turned out to be about 4 or 5 months later.
Oh, wow.
And I also thought that what they were gonna send me was you know, like a head sculpt or an accessory or just something little to kind of dip my toe in, knowing that I had never done this before. Yeah. Instead, they sent me this like fully articulated, you know, robot was supposed to be like a Build-A-Figure that was going to go be packed in with all these other toys and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So I had no idea to do any of that stuff. So not only did it have to have articulation, it had to be able to snap together from individual pieces. So all this stuff that I had no clue how to do. Yeah. So I basically just, I had some toys. So I tore them apart. I tore some toys apart to just kind of get an idea of what their ball joints and things look like. I scoured the internet, and at the time you couldn't really, I mean, obviously YouTube and stuff was a thing, but there, even compared to the day where you can just type in, you know, anything just about and get 1,000 results on how to do stuff in ZBrush, there really wasn't anything on articulation. and then I found like one tiny little like tutorial from Joseph. I think we talked about this prior.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
And he had like it was a very specific kind of articulation. It wasn't necessarily what I needed, but it helped me wrap my head around what I needed to do.
Yeah.
And I faked it until I made it kind of thing with that one, and just it was a real trial by fire. So that's the long answer to how I learned articulation. I didn't know how to do it until I got the job, and then I had to know how to do it.
No,
And,
I think that's perfect. Jumping in feet first. That's how I learn. You know, I could read a book all day long. I won't retain anything, but you know, tell me here's the sphere. Now try to cut something to make it movable and give me parameters, and I'll do my best. And then when I fail, I then turn around and just say, well, what could I do better? And then you just start, you just figure it out, and then eventually it's helpful.
Yeah, and I would say too, like anyone who wants to do toys, get yourself a resin, like a 3D printer, get one, the $200 one off the Amazon or whatever, and just do that. Make a simple, take one of your sculpts, cut it up the best way you know how, break open some toys, print them out and make sure they work, just fit them together and just do that till you figure it out. And once you kind of figure out one or two joints, you'll know how to do it for the whole thing. I mean, it's not that articulation is complicated. It's that every new project has its own complication, like some anatomy that's in the way, or some feature on the figure, or some design element that you have to work around, and you have to figure out, they want to get they want a double elbow in something and he's got baggy sleeves, well, how do we do that? There's things like that. I mean, I've been doing this for going on eight years now, and I'm still, every project I'm like, oh great, how am I going to do that? Like almost every single one I have to contemplate and think it through, and some of it's from not experiencing it before, and some of it's because I have experienced it before and it was a mess, and I'm like hoping that we have a better solution that than my first time around.
Absolutely. Well, we have some very interested audience members who would love to see an articulation pipeline, or at least a breakdown of what it is and how you approach maybe articulating an arm or a foot. If you would love
I can do that. Yeah, I can do something like that.
Go right. So real quick too. So everybody, just if you're unfamiliar with what articulation is, it's a point of contact in which you're going to have a joint basically move. Brodie's going to go into a little bit more than that quick gloss over, but ideally, you're trying to always preserve the sculpt as much as possible.
Yeah, this is articulate. So, this is actually the first toy I ever did. This is the one I was talking about that I had to figure out how to do on the fly. So you got your, it's got an elbow joint. It's got, this one, pretty simple stuff. I mean, it wasn't simple at the time, but it's mostly a series of ball joints. You can actually see the ball on this one pretty clear.
Yeah.
And depending on the design and depending on the studio or the company you're working with, they may be more or less concerned about, can you see the articulation when you just look at it or not. But yeah.
Yeah, very, very cool. And so real quick too, before you get into the nitty gritty of explaining topology in ZBrush, important? Do you yourself maybe have cleaner topology or try UVs? What's your approach?
Don't really ever worry about UVs. I can't remember the last time I had to worry about UVs. But topology, it just depends. You can, I do something that a lot of people may not do, and I spend a lot of time in Dynamesh. A lot of people just use Dynamesh at the beginning to rough out their piece. Or if you're doing your 3D print, then you might use it at the end to make your stuff watertight. But most people use Dynamesh just as sort of something you do before you start getting into the nitty gritty. And it's not uncommon for me to stay in Dynamesh the entire time. Yeah. And of course, when you are you don't have very clean topology. So there will be times where I'm like, well, I need this surface to have some little bit cleaner surface so I can apply some sort of alpha to it a little cleaner, or some surface noise or something like that to it, to get it nice and even looking. So I'll just do it here in ZBrush and get some clean up topology in here. But I haven't really taken. I have what is that software? Topogun, which I used to use all the time before I started doing toys, and I think it's great software, but I haven't really needed that level of control, or pretty much the Z-remesh works a lot of times. Sometimes that's all I really even need to do. Sometimes I just Z-remesh the like the arm joint or whatever, the arm piece or something, and that gives me enough of that cleans it up enough to where I can just subdivide it a few times, project my details, and then go in and finish up doing what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, topology, yes and no. It just really depends.
Very cool.
But actually, I'll show you real quick. I can show you. Here's an example where topology was important. I got one for that. Let's see. This is from. This is one I did for Four Horsemen for Mattel. This is the movie Flash.
Wow, it's a lot of detail on there. That's really cool. I personally, I'm gonna say, first appearance, those fingers are wicked. I love it. Just that, like, they're just, the posing is just fantastic.
Yeah, that's one of when I used to draw a lot, I hated drawing hands, but I love sculpting them. I don't know, I kind of Rob Liefeld my hands and feet when I was drawing, just random shape and kind of off on the side of the screen where you maybe didn't notice them, or just cut them off.
Yeah, little bubble. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's smoke, like you can't. It's a silhouette.
Yeah.
But when it comes to toys, I love dynamic hands, and I think that is just part of being a fan of toys. And few things bring me more joy than getting a toy. Being able to pop off the default fist hand, and then there's some like gesture or something. I almost always just pop the fist off, toss them in the box, never look at them again, pop on the cool hand, and that's just me. So I think I personally just want to have cool hands and on my toys. So but yeah, so this guy had to have pretty clean. I don't know what it is now because I think this might be all Dynameshed and everything. Let's see if I can show it here. Yeah, it looks like Dynameshed to me. So I don't know if I even have the file anymore, but this guy was so complicated because there was just, it's a whole other level when you start having to do the details from like a film design, because they tend to over design everything, so you've got layer upon layer upon, even the pattern, like when you first glance at like the Flash suit design, you just see all these little kind of grid marks and patterns, and I assumed upon first glance when looking at the reference that it was all the same pattern, just different. But no, it's like different patterns, different size patterns. Some of it is the same pattern, but sometimes it's tiny and sometimes it's big, and it's just
it's a way to bring the asymmetrical game in.
yeah, and then of course like the wires going all over the place, and of course these all had to be like pushed down into the thing so that's one solid piece. We can have a lot of overlapping parts and whatnot. But
and how did you get all those so you say you work mostly in Dynamesh, so leading to the question, how do you keep those sharp edges looking really nice and sharp?
Generally just probably project, probably just Dynamesh, make a copy of your piece, and then after you're done working on it, once you've Dynamesh and everything, you just project the other piece onto it. That's usually what I do. Nice,
that's cool. All right, so I kept you from showing your articulation process by asking you more questions. So
let's see what else we got. Here we go. Right, this was something I did for NECA a couple years back. This is the rough Godzilla, right? This is our 1980. What was it? 85? Was that it? I can't remember. Anyways,
that one.
it was my favorite Godzilla design, so I was happy to be able to do it. The way I approach articulation varies character to character. Sometimes I'll get almost done with the figure, or 90% done with my details before I start worrying about articulation. But something like this guy, I was worried because he's a chunky boy and he's got these, you know, massive thighs, and he's got like his arms are kind of like he just had a lot more kind of going on, and I was worried about like spending all this time pumping in all this detail, and then starting to cut and try to add articulation in, because you know then you're messing with the surface, and then you're gonna have to go back and try to clean that surface up. And so for this one, I took a little bit different approach. I did the articulation when I had my kind of base mesh ready to go. I did the major articulation, the major cuts, and I can show how I did like a shoulder joint here, if that's what you guys want to see. I can show that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, they're getting excited. They're like, yes, 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 yes.
All right.
So just real quick, everybody to the chat too. Articulation takes a long time to learn as well. There's a lot of finessing and trial and error, like mentioned before. So when watching this process, you know, and you're trying it for the first time, definitely give yourself some slack and just try again, and don't be afraid to fail a few times before you get it. I personally tried articulation for the first time during a live stream like 3 years ago, and panicked. And everybody was there like, oh no, it's fine, it's fine. And I was like, no, it's not fine, it's it's failing. But I just jumped into the fire. So yeah, so you know, so yeah.
Go for your mom to bring you more spaghetti.
Just do it, guys. You could do it.
More spaghetti, mom.
All right, here we go.
So what I like to do, and is I like to, every single project I do this. A smarter person would just do this one time, save it, and then import it. I don't do that. I'm not that smart, I guess. But I like to create a default tool for my like shoulder joints, and this won't work for everything. It won't work for like a ab crunch, or you know, maybe like the neck or something, or the hips are a little different. But this is a good starter sort of default ball joint tool that I like to use to kind of work into everything.
Yeah.
So I just started it with a sphere. I just append it in regular old sphere, subdivide it a couple times to get it smooth. Old habit, I just delete the subdivisions because I don't need them. I leave it at its default spot. Then I append in a cylinder. Do the same thing, same thing. And shrink it down a hair.
Notice how he doesn't even have a wireframe, Sean. He doesn't even care.
I don't care. I'll duplicate it, and I have one on its side and one not on its side. So the one facing up and down, I move to the top, extend it out, shrink it down a hair.
Nice.
Go ahead and chop it. Boom. This is going to be my peg. So this is important because this is kind of your center. This is your rotation point. Not every toy company requires you do pegs. NECA, Four Horsemen did for a little bit, and then that kind of dropped off. But NECA, we do them all the time, and I had to get back in the habit when I started working for them full time of doing it, and I'm really glad I did, because it really helps. Because things get moved around, your rotation points get moved around, and nothing is worse than you're working on articulation, you load in your project, and for some reason the rotation point moved way over here, and now you've just got to try to figure out how to get it back to center. If you always have if you got a peg in there, then you always have a point that you can attach to.
Nice.
So even if this goes way over here and you're like, oh no, it's off, you can just tap on it and then center it, and you're back to dead center to your rotation point. So it's a nice little thing for that. Okay, so I take my sphere, I duplicate that. So now I've got two spheres. I'm gonna hide one just to show this. And this is me eyeballing, right? That's what I do best, is eyeball. And forget to turn on symmetry. Turn on symmetry. Too much English there. There we go. That's pretty clean. All right, that's pretty good. That's good enough. I'll turn this back on. So what I like to do is I like to take this sphere and just shrink it down to just a hair. So you can see that through it.
Yeah.
And there we go. This is pretty much my default shoulder joint. So I'm going to merge all these down into one tool. Auto group it. It's very pretty, very nice colors. Master tool of all power. All right.
All right.
So that's my master tool, and I just duplicate it. I hide that girl. Hand this up here. I turn my visibility back on for my arms. You can see it's massive. So the first thing I need to do is I just kind of resize this guy and try to keep everything at 90 degrees as much as possible, just because it makes things so much easier. But that said, a wonderful feature that you guys added, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, the home and target stage feature. That you know, I don't often have a lot of time to dig into all the new features whenever new ones come out for ZBrush. But this one I did, and I'm really glad that I took the time to learn it. Obviously, it doesn't take that long to learn that one, but it is. I use it in almost every single project. It's a good one. It's a really good one.
Nice.
So then I just kind of I just kind of eyeball and see. Turn my transparent on here. Usually you kind of want it set just inside the torso, like the center, just slightly inside the torso, where you think the cavity is going to be for your torso.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to also mind your middle line here. You know, you need some space in there, and you also have to consider like what kind of neck joint you have going on, and if you're going to have stuff that's going to encroach on this space here.
Yeah.
As far as other joints popping in and stuff. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff to always consider. Just to be on the safe side, we're going to scooch this guy in a hair. That's a pretty big, beefy joint there. So
it's Godzilla, man.
It's Godzilla. Yeah.
Deserves the biggest.
So here's my arms. I'm gonna let's see. Yeah, let's just we'll hide these guys for now because we don't need them. So this is my upper arm. One thing I do, I guess I could mention that, is I like to go through before I do any articulation. I just make rough cuts of where generally where things are going to be. So I got my shoulder joint, got a cut here where the elbow is going to go, cut where the wrist is going to go, and this could change. I mean, that's not even clean or pretty, you know, at all. That's wonky as you know, it can be, but it doesn't really matter. It's just to kind of help me, kind of guide me while I start keying this stuff in.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I do love about toys, is working on toys, is a lot of it is very, at least to me, a lot of it is very, you're just kind of playing with the software, and you're kind of playing with the sculpt for the whole thing. There isn't a ton of like super technical concerns, I guess is the best way I can put it. You know, when you're working in game design and stuff like that, you have a lot of like things you got to keep in mind that seem almost overwhelming to someone like me. If you're in the gaming industry, you're probably like second nature, but you know, the main concerns for the toys are the integrity of the sculpt, trying to maintain that as best you can, and then, you know, worrying about articulation. You got pretty much two things to worry about. Everything else is just gravy. You know, it's if you can use the tool, if you can use the feature, do it, you know, if it makes your life easier. But otherwise, it's you're just playing until you get something that looks cool.
And that's what's really cool about toys. That's how I fell into toys too. Just being able to play. It's not super technical. You can just get in there and have fun and just start messing about. I think that's really neat.
Let's see here.
So what's the main thing that you're really focusing on once you place the joint? What's the biggest thing that you're...
Well, for this is kind of the silhouette, you know, like this is a rough sculpt, so it's not perfect anyway, but I don't want to like, you know, I don't want to give him like that, right? I don't want him to have these bubbles, you know. So I want it to be close to this, but you know, in order to do that, I know I'm gonna have to like trim off this little hair, this little piece here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's gonna be this dip into the torso, and I could bring the torso out a little bit more to kind of hide that, you know. So just those kind of things. Again, it's all about just trying to maintain the integrity of the sculpt while shoving articulation in there and then hiding the articulation as best you can.
Yeah.
For what, you know, whatever the client may need. Sometimes it's impossible. Sometimes what the client is asking for is there's no way to make it pretty. It's just, okay, you want like the biggest cut in the world on like some big baggy pants. There's no way to make that like pretty, really. Maybe it look good in a static picture, but then once you move it, it just breaks the whole thing. And anyone who collects toys knows all about that. As soon as you start, some figures, once you start moving them around, you're like, oh my gosh, like what did they, you know, why did they do that? But
Yeah,
you know, just is what it is. So now what I'll do is, what I want to do with this here is just to kind of break it down. This green ball is going to become part of the arm.
mm-hmm.
The rest of it is my actual joint, my peg, and my hinge. So what I will do is I will hide that. I will split off that. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate since we have two shoulders here. I want you to remember where that button is. That's another reason I delete my divides, just kind of my subdivisions, like immediately. It's just habit because I know eventually I'm going to mirror, and I have to delete them before I mirror anyway. So
yeah, that's smart. That's a great way to go about it.
So merge those down. Here's another thing. I often get asked, like, what resolution to set your Dynamesh to. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Just do it until it looks good.
Well, you know we have a picker now, right?
You have a what? Oh yeah, you do. There's a feature I haven't learned. You'll have to,
Yeah. So real quick here, so if you're unsure, if anybody here is unsure of how to go about finding out your resolution for Dynamesh, so because your model and the viewport is dependent on each other in order for the resolution to matter. So if you go ahead to geometry and then go to Dynamesh, so I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Geometry,
and then open up Dynamesh.
Yeah.
And then you'll notice near the resolution slider, there's a picker. If you click and hold and drag that over to your subtool in your viewport, you'll notice that the resolution is actually going to start to adjust. And that is the current resolution of your model. And then you can just either Dynamesh from there or just increase it a little bit more, and then you're good. Boom.
Huh.
So you don't have to slide it or guess or go like, okay, 64, no, Control Z, no. Just that picker, click and drag,
cool.
right over that subtool.
Wow, that's nice.
Bing, bada, boom. That gives you the idea of where it's currently at, and then you can adjust from there. So if you need to go lower, go lower. And you go higher, go higher.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep, it's one of the best like features that it came out very recently. I think it was.
I remember. Now that you mentioned it, I remember reading or watching a video about it. You guys doing cool things.
Shay Nelson says he may or may not have suggested that.
Shane's great.
Well, Shane and Brian Beatty say hi. A-Cube says hi. Actually, we do have a question too. Since you're going over this part, we kind of touched on it a little bit with typical production. Like, what's the typical production pipeline? We kind of, I know every model depends, but you know, at the end of the day, like start to finish, average day through, what would you consider to be a typical pipeline that people can follow when they're trying to build their own toys?
Oh, like as far as just doing it yourself, or like in the industry? Like
within the industry.
Oh, within the industry. Well, art director sends over reference, and depending on that reference, sometimes it's really straightforward, and sometimes it's screen grabs from a bunch of 80s cartoons. I don't know what I could possibly be talking about when I reference 80s cartoons, but sometimes it's just random screen grabs from a bunch of 80s cartoons, and then we have to have long conversations over which version of that character we're going to steer towards, because they kind of change the way they look frame to frame to frame often in those days. And once you kind of nail down that, I like to use, this is kind of going off a little bit, but I'm sure you guys have heard of it before, but PureRef is a cool free software. It's great. I use it all the time for all my reference stuff. So I usually put a reference sheet together on PureRef. And then I just build out I try to just do the entire figure as far as just kind of a rough model of the entire figure, almost like this Godzilla, but without the details.
Mm-hmm.
I'll pretty much do the whole thing just to, pull off the arms and legs and tail and everything like that. And at least for me, before I do anything else, I like to try to nail down the likeness of the face. It could be a preference thing because I like to sculpt face, head sculpts, and stuff like that. But I also feel like I think it's also like a mental thing for me. Like if I know I've got the face right, if I can nail that, the vibe that it's the reference is going for, then I feel comfortable doing the rest of the figure, and I can everything can kind of follow suit. But usually I do most of the sculpting first. Usually at least about 60% of the sculpting in completion to before I start cutting in the articulation, and
Gotcha.
then I'll go in usually. And a lot of times I won't do all the articulation. A lot of times I'll come in and I'll do like the bigger joints, like the shoulder, maybe the neck, maybe an elbow. A lot of times, a lot of toys use what we call diapers, which are just outer shell. A lot of times it's because it literally looks like a diaper. It's just like an outer crotch piece that covers all the articulation, so you can't see the hip joints.
Yeah.
Gives you a cleaner look when you have the toy. So those can be a little complicated to get to clean out and to I love that I'm talking about diapers and talking about cleaning them out. Yes, I do have kids.
That's a perfect.
But yeah, so just that can be a little complicated. So sometimes I'll do that too, just for like peace of mind, just because for me, when it comes to work, a lot of it is a series of boulders to push up a hill. It's just a series of like this next big thing that I'm going to have to do. There's all the stuff I know I can do. I can do that at any point. But then there's like the things that stress me out. And I get to a point once I get kind of rolling with the project where, okay, now it's time to start tackling those headaches so that I don't have to sweat those. Because once I know those are done and Trevor and all the guys over at NECA or whoever are happy with what I'm doing, then I can jump on all the stuff to finish up all the stuff that I know I can do, in my sleep. And I don't know if that really answers the workflow, but question very well. But that's basically how I do it.
That sounds about right.
And then once it's all done, you send all the STL files to China, and they make the toys and on your shelf, and you try to buy them.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. I'll let you continue this joint. It's looking really awesome already. It's kind of segueing back into it. It might seem obvious and stuff like that, but it's crucial that once you've set your joint where it's at, to not move it while you're positioning the sculpt.
Yeah. That and there are you sometimes have to, and then that creates a whole bunch of headaches and backtracking and there are different things that I've yet to kind of find the best solution to when those kind of things happen. What I've done in the past and what some people do before, like at this point, maybe before I start even messing with the geometry, I'll save this subtool out, upper arm subtool, and I'll just drop it down in a file. In fact, I have one here called Backup that has a few things in it.
Nice.
It's just like the original sculpt, before I even did the cuts. Yeah. And I've had projects where I've had 20, 30 backups of, entire figures. Or sometimes I'll do a cut, like an elbow cut, and I'm not sure I like it. So before I'll make a copy of that before I go any further. And, it's a lot of it is just duplication and making sure that you have something that you can always go back to in case it turns out being horrible or it turns out just not being, what you were trying to achieve. So.
Makes sense. Absolutely.
Anyway, so here I'm just sort of, this is not exactly how I would always do it, but you just try to make it blend in a bit into that ball joint as best you can. You want it to be nice and smooth to it as much as possible. So just kind of moving it all around to check. And the main thing you want to be concerned about is like, it's okay if I have like some buildup here, you know, because that's really not gonna go too far into the chest, right, or into the torso. So he could have like, he doesn't really have shoulders like that, but you can have like details and all the way up to there. It just depends on how high you want his arms to be able to go, right?
Right.
So if you want his arms to be able to go, you know, I'm just eyeballing that, but okay. So I just kind of do that kind of stuff all the time. I just kind of eyeball how the articulation is going to look, how it's going to affect, you know, one structure is going to affect the other, and adjust if I feel like I need to.
Nice. And do you usually have, like, do you have run into problems often when trying to figure out, you know, those joints, especially like knee joints or elbow joints, when you're running into, like, I guess I have to phrase the question a little bit different.
Yes.
Sorry. But like, when you run into
problems with knee joints and
yeah,
period. Whatever the rest of your question is, the answer is yes.
Yeah. And how do you go about like troubleshooting that? Like, you know, let's say you were working on a double knee joint and it's just not working for you. What's like the best approach to try to solve that problem?
Starting over, really. I mean, a lot of it is, especially double knee joints. I don't know what it is about, you know, there's two things that give me a headache, and it's one, if you got like a really big dude with like big biceps and they want to put a double elbow joint in. It's like often the forearm and the bicep are going to hit like around 75 degrees or so sometimes. And then you end up having to squish the bicep way back just so you get the range. And then you got this gap here. And it's kind of like the nightmare fuel of our articulation a lot of times. It's just, you just play around with it. But yeah, I mean, it is just troubleshooting. There is no magic. I don't have a magic formula. You know, some of the guys over at NECA may have a magic formula, and they just haven't shared it with me yet. They're stingy.
We'll contact the higher ups. Come on. Now.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I mean, literally, it is just this. It's like I'll take it and I'll look and I'll bend it. I'll bend the I'll move the joint around, and I'm like, it's clipping too much. Maybe I need to shrink the ball joint a little bit and move it to here, and then what's that going to give me? You know, and that might work better. And then it's a matter of like, okay, now I've got to move this whole joint and basically redo the whole, you know, basically starting over on that joint 100% to, you know, but now I know where my rotation is. And you could probably even do that before you start, you know, as I'm talking here, you could probably, before you even like actually start putting in a ball joint or anything like that, you could just play around. You could do some basic cuts, and you can just kind of like take this and be like, okay, if my, there we go. Let's see, let's just kind of eyeball it here, but just kind of line it up here. This is a horrible cut, but let's just pretend it's not.
Okay, that's perfect.
You know?
What are you talking about?
So, you know, so you might like you could just go ahead and start playing with that before you even start worrying about actually putting in a ball joint or anything, and looking at how your geometry is going to interact if you put the rotation point there. If you don't like that, then you know your rotation point might need to be here, and that's a little bit better. You get a little bit further bend. Okay, so now you got to worry about all this empty space back here, and
yeah. But you get to basically choose the pivot point, right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
I think that's a question I've gotten before too. It was like, where do I put the pivot point? Wherever it makes the most sense, you know.
I mean, I'm sure there is a math equation out there that determines the best place, and you know, you look at companies like Hasbro, who pump out millions of Marvel Legends figures, and they all have pretty much the same articulation across the board. Either they did that by hand and they just thought it worked, or someone did some calculations and decided that was the most efficient, best bang for their buck across the board. And it helps that their body types don't vary too crazy. They have a couple of bucks that they can often reuse. And but when you're dealing with figures that change, you know, shape and size, and it was the same thing when I was doing stuff with Mattel. We had some buck bodies, and so once that articulation is kind of nailed in, it's not super hard to do the articulation because you've already got a template there. But when you're dealing with something like Godzilla, where there is no buck, a buck, for those who don't know, is just it's almost like a prefab body that already has all the articulation cut in, and then a company will continue to reuse that, and they'll just kind of change it with deco or maybe some additional details or things like that to differentiate between the characters. And it's a money-saving tactic, but it's also an efficient tactic, and it works. It works great. But
well,
most of the stuff for NECA though is you can't do that. Like, we can't get away with that. With 99% of our stuff, we have to do everything, almost everything from scratch. So
absolutely.
So let's see here. Try to hurry and get this guy here. So let's just pretend this is super pretty and exactly what we are looking for.
I love it.
So then what I do, I'll just merge this, what I would call like the shoulder ball, down into the main arm. Just merge down, and I group them. And just would pull my picker. I'll have to put a little like custom button here so I can do that. That'd be dandy.
Oh yeah.
All right, that's fine. And I clean up anything. I try not to mess with the ball at all. I try not to, I don't want to deform it as much as I can not. Just try to clean that up. So now you got this. So then one thing I like to do is just clean this little cut up here.
Oh, is that the damn standard?
Yeah, damn standard. Just old faithful here.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good approach.
Just gonna clean it a little bit here. All right, that's fine. And once again, duplicate my joint, mirror it, and then so now I've got my two shoulder joints in place pretty much as I needed. Now I just need to make my the cuts for those joints on the shoulder piece itself. So to do that, I just duplicate both of those guys, both of the joints again, and merge them down, drop them, turn on. Here, I'll hide these so you can see. Turn on my booleans.
Nice.
You can kind of see that. I'll hide the head here. Now, obviously, let's see. I'll put my joints down below here. Is there a button that makes it so? And by asking, I'm also suggesting that you guys make one. That I could click so that it doesn't do this, and I don't have to actually just drag it down below.
Well, there is a down button if you want the down button. If you go to the bottom of your subtool list where it says new folder, there's up and down buttons.
No, I just mean, like, it'd be great if there was a button that no, I'm not getting it. What happened here? So it's the same subtool, and I don't want it to subtract from.
Oh, okay.
This is right. So it'd be great if there was a button that would make it not. Basically make it ignore the Boolean operation.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah, because right now
instead of having to drag things around, to get that result. Anyway.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just trying to have my Shane Olsen moment and suggest something that you guys
we'll note it.
All right. And this is another thing too. I'm sure other people do it differently, but I use the inflate tool. Whoops, I must have already done it. There we go. I use the inflate tool to set my difference, because you got your boolean, it has to be bigger than your joint or it won't fit, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of those things that I eyeball from one sometimes does it maybe a little high.
Now you do this portion before you haven't set scene scale or nothing. You were just using using the slider to inflate. Yeah,
I'm just playing with it right here. So yeah, that's pretty good. So then for that, you can see obviously it's that's very thin. There's not enough meat on those bones, so I'm gonna have to pull this out a little bit so that it doesn't break, so that there's a little more plastic there for the joint to run through. So just a tiny bit.
And are you worried about wall thickness at this moment?
No, because well, that's kind of what I'm trying to do is like thicken up the wall there. Because before it was like that.
Yeah.
I just want it to get a little bit thicker. Yeah, something along those lines there. There we go. So that's pretty much your joint. So it looks like this guy got moved. I don't even know how this got moved.
Well, you have did you have local symmetry turned on when you did a mirror?
Maybe that's what happened. Yeah. These are the kind of things that you get 40 hours into a project and like, what happened?
Yeah, that'll do it.
There we go. All right. Just
also, too, try something for me real quick. When you were talking about the Boolean operations and the negative subtract, that start arrow in each subtool, how it identifies each of the subtools underneath it, and you can click that tool.
Yeah.
So if you click that one, and then is that what you were referring to when you were asking about the button? When you click on the start arrow, it should identify.
Oh, will it prevent it from? That's right.
It's like a parent-child.
If I do that, it'll stop it from. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so you have to do that on each one. A lot of people have gotten away from that. I barely use that system because folders, I only when I Boolean something, I only throw in the stuff I'm absolutely cutting in that folder, because that does it by default. But that's been around for a little bit. It's kind of like a parent-child hierarchy you can go through. So if you have multiple things where you're trying to cut, that's the way to do it. Yeah.
So yeah, there you go. That's a shoulder joint pretty much ready to rock. And then you would, from there, you would want to hide you would basically want to take this whole piece, this whole thing here, the whole shoulder joint with the joint in it and everything. And you would want to subtract it from the torso to make your chest joint.
Yeah.
Minus the peg. You want to get rid of the peg. And also, just to back up a hair, it might even be better if you got rid of the peg, and duplicated your whole piece, and then merged it together to make it to get rid of any like cracks or holes or spaces, because obviously those would show up once you sub them from your torso.
Yeah.
You would have like all this weird stuff. So you'd want it to be as smooth and clean as possible without these holes and whatnot. So, but yeah, that's pretty much the extent of it.
Nice.
That's a huge peg, by the way. I wouldn't normally do a peg that big,
but that's a great example of articulation. Thank you for going through that. That's awesome. Yeah. What's your favorite articulated joint that you love to do? Like, you're excited about it?
Oh, I don't. There's none.
Not
Probably the
one?
shoulder joints because I can do it pretty quick and efficiently.
Yeah.
And then that extends to like the wrist and ankles. Double ball joint for the head's pretty easy to do. Any kind of double ball joints generally pretty easy.
Yeah, nice.
The hardest ones for me are like the ab crunches. Those are tricky. I've yet to really crack the code on that. I just have to wrestle with it until I get something that looks good and works. You know.
No, that's awesome. Are the sculptors at NECA, are they responsible for this part of the process? Typically, this is what a lot of sculptors would do, or is this more like lead sculptor?
No, everybody. Yeah, everybody. As far as I know, unless they're holding out on me and, you know,
just sending you all the joints.
Just sending me all the, yeah. I'll just open up another project. Just.
No,
yeah, everyone, and every company is different. There have been companies I've sculpted for as a freelance artist in the past who all you have to worry about is sculpt, and that's a wonderful feeling because you don't concern yourself with any of that, and you can just be purely creative. And then you just pass it on, and then somebody you know less fortunate than you has to go through your mess of a file and figure out how to make it into a toy.
right.
In fact, one of the last projects I did as a freelance artist, I worked on a Stitch action figure for Super 7, and I got all the way to the end of the sculpt process, and then started with NECA, and I had to send it to back to Super 7, and then I found out my buddy Brian Beatty, who you guys had on a couple of weeks back, was the unlucky individual who had to articulate all those tiny little, like, if you know what Stitch looks like, he's got tiny little legs, tiny little whatever. So between doing the articulation for that and having to deal with feedback from Disney, which is notoriously brutal, I probably owe that guy a couple of drinks.
Well, he's here now, so you can say hi.
Yeah.
No, that's nice. So tell us about this. Tell us about this piece right here. How long?
This is another one where actually there is one thing that, and maybe it's something that would exist or in some form, or there's a workaround. But one thing that would be really cool is some sort of IK chain-ish thing in ZBrush where like I could select like the elbow and it would automatically select the rest of my down chain. You know, it would select you know, the wrist joint and the hand and everything. So when I do my rotation, it moved everything together.
Well, so
I'll have it to like put everything in a folder and then say, you know.
Here, I'll blow your mind. There's a way to do it. Right. It's with the Gizmo. So with the Gizmo right here next to this lock, the little lock icon, you have that little pizza box. So on that. Okay. So now this has everything. So you can see right now the things that are like kind of looking like aliasing, that's negative, that's deselected, and everything is visible selected. So by using Control Shift to select drag, what you can do is you can do select drag, hold Alt, and just deselect everything. So while that's active.
For some reason, it's not selected.
So no, off screen, like off of the viewport, like you were to kind of, you know, use Control Shift to, you know, drag select a bunch of objects.
Okay.
You can select drag only what you want, or you can Control Shift tap the things that you want and tap the things that you don't want.
Let me see if you're talking shenanigans or not. Hold on.
Oh no, I'll pop on with my ZBrush and I'll show you. you know the select drag what we're talking about here. 1 second here. I can load up ZBrush too.
Show me. Give me a lesson. That'd be great.
Let me load it up. Yeah. It'll take me a second. I did not have ZBrush loaded.
You were ready for the spotlight guy to put you on the spotlight.
But yeah, you can tap your models on and off. So you give me 1 second.
So I would be able to select the forearm, this joint, and this joint, and then rotate it. And the rotation would stay with the original subtool, or would it?
Yeah, let me load up a project real quick, and then I'll share my screen. So give me 1 second. Boop, 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 boop. Gonna go ahead and share. Let's go to my share screen.
I tell people all the time, like when it comes to ZBrush, I probably use 15% of the features. You know, I'm a guy who like hits things with a rock until it works for me. You know.
Yeah.
More often than not, and then I found out a feature that would have made my life so much easier if I just learned it.
Okay, so you see my screen?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So with the Gizmo right now, with the Gizmo, if I go ahead and tap this little pizza box, and then by holding Control Shift, I can actually select, or by holding Alt deselect.
Oh.
So I can select these two objects here, or what I can do is I can actually just tap the objects I would like to move, and then now I'm moving those objects. And these subtools are not connected. If I open up my subtools, they're all different subtools. So they're all, so you could do that with your joints. So you could,
Shift, you said, yeah? Just,
yeah.
I got the wrong thing. I got to cut.
Yeah, so you'll be able to pick a pivot spot.
Oh, hit this first, and then.
There you go.
Why has it got all this other stuff?
Now, if you have a bunch of stuff in one subtool, you can either separate them or mask them off, and that will also do the same thing.
No, this is weird. No, those are these hands are all in their own.
So Control Shift tap, and you should be able to deselect them. There you go. And just deselect what you don't want. Same with the head, and yep. And hold, well, that selects, so hold Alt to deselect that. Yeah.
Right. All right.
Yep.
I think
Yep. And now you can just move what you would like to move. There you go.
Look at that. Golly, you guys.
Yep.
Pulling out the hits.
Yep.
All right, cool.
So if you have multiple objects in the same subtool, just mask off what you don't want to move, and it'll move only the unmasked spots.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going about that way. I mean, normally I don't need to see that the hand moves, you know, but it's just it's nice.
No, yeah.
You get a much better idea of what the figure can and can't do.
Oh, absolutely. Well, see, the cool part is that, you know, if you want to get fancy and create one of those little GIFs, you know, or movie clips of it moving up and down in ZBrush, you can, you know, add on layers and control the movement in layers, and then create a timeline, and yeah, you can make some fun little animations that way.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, why did I open up this guy? He's one of our newer ones. He was revealed on video during an interview with Trevor, who's like my art director, another wonderful sculptor over there at NECA. And he revealed the prototype, and then we had him on display at Comic-Con as well. But he's not out yet, but he will be hopefully soonish. But this guy was cool. I just like special little features on toys that are, you know, something beyond just, you know, the regular joints. I like when things have like little, like he has these little chest plates. So these little things that, like, flip up, and you know, he's got just some computer stuff in there so that the turtles can operate on them as needed, and stuff like that. It's just always a lot of fun to build. And then you have to worry about, you know, you got to worry about how it's going to sit in there. So you have to build like a little lip around it for the piece to sit in and nestle against. And then you have to make sure that the lip is higher than all the little details. And, you know, there's like a lot of little technical things that you have to concern yourself with. But that's the kind of stuff that gets, as far as articulation being exciting, it's not to me, but things like that are exciting to me. It's fun when we add little, like, just cool little, you know, features. Even this is kind of fun. Just, it's a very small thing, but I like this a lot. So this is his mouth opens just a little bit. There's not a ton of clearance you can see. He's got a little mouth under there, right?
Yeah.
And he's got a tongue that we see.
That's awesome. Well, here, do you know the feature stager that we have?
Yeah. It's great.
Do you use that to test? So you can use that to test your animations and stuff too.
Yeah, I was saying earlier that's one of my favorite newer features that you guys use. It's that you guys implement. I use it. The one feature that I wish I used more, because it is a really good feature, I just forget it exists, is the V1, V2, V3, V4. You know, the
oh yeah, yeah, those are the
I
subfolders.
always forget about it, and then I'm like, I'm hiding like half, a dozen subtools and hunting for other things. I'm like, okay, and then I do my renders to send off to the guys to like check out and make sure, send my turns in for approval or whatever, and then I have to unhide and find the things again. And I'm like, why don't I just set up the V1? Like that would be the smart thing to do. And I just forget to do the smart thing very often.
Yeah, the subfolders are cool. I do that a lot when I'm working on pieces that I need to hide a lot, like everything but the one thing I'm working on. But then, so then when I want to see everything again, those subfolders are very handy. I think it's just getting used to seeing them. That's still a relatively new feature.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, this looks really, really great. So
yeah.
So we had a couple other questions come in too. Do you handle draft as a sculptor, or is that done at the factory? Is that something you deal with?
I don't really worry myself with it much. I think I'm pretty good at just sort of spotting it, like where there's issues with it. But it's not something that I really think about while I'm working. In fact, the only company I've ever worked with that made kind of a big deal about it was Hasbro, and it was with Paul Bennett, who you guys should know. If you don't, he did
we know Paul.
Yeah, Paul's great. So he talked about drafting quite a bit in his presentation, and when we worked on a project together, we did a Mandalorian retro Mandalorian action figure.
Nice.
A couple years back, and there were there was kind of two reasons for that. One, we were trying to mimic the old style of the retro toys, which those are all pulled out of mold. They're just done very differently, so everything has a grade to it. Nothing is a box, nothing is a so and that was new for me. I never had to do. In all my years of doing this stuff, I had never done a retro style toy, trying to mimic an older style toy. So we talked about it a lot, and it was sort of new to me. I'm sure those are still concerns. Like you don't want undercuts. Like you don't want details that undercut things, because when they pull them out of the molds and all that kind of stuff, you can have issues. But a lot of that stuff, I think a lot of it gets fixed in the factory. There's a lot of that stuff that I personally haven't got a lot of guff about over the years. So.
No, that's really cool. That's really cool to know. Dude, what is, I would say, I'm asking, how many points of articulation at most for a single toy have you ever done?
I have no idea.
Sometimes I'll see in the shop and it's like in the store and it's like, 28 points of articulation. I'm like, oh my God, that sculptor must have gone crazy.
Yeah, I don't really know. Chrome Dome has quite a bit. Just looking at my shelf here. Just pretty much anything with like a double elbows, double knees, that kind of stuff. I think even Chrome Dome even has like toe articulation, so that that kind of counts. Once you get past that, you're dealing with kind of like the Japanese toys, like Revoltech kind of style stuff, where they're just insane, like their shoulder blades move separately from their something like this is from 1,000 Toys. It's a pretty good toy just to kind of keep around, because he's incredibly ridiculously articulated in almost every possible way, and you can get him into just his torso. I don't know if you can see that, but just his torso has about 4 different joints in it, from the rib cage to the stomach down into the groin. And then even the hips have like, and covering it up, but has like an inner ball right there that gives you a little extra reach, and then it has a ball there, and then you know, this thing is just engineered to a ridiculous degree, and you know, it's awesome.
Yeah,
Thousand Toy guys are good at what they do. They're good people.
Yeah.
Good guys.
Nice. And we touched on this a little bit before, but you know, topology is not really a huge factor. It's more of like, you know, you're sculpting first, and then after that you figure out the joints. So if somebody had asked recently, actually, suddenly, if poly modeling, sub-D modeling, is that kind of enough? You know, we covered that a little bit in the beginning of the stream, but if you want to touch on a little bit more, you were saying how you primarily stay in Dynamesh. Like, topology is not.
What I mean by saying I primarily stay in Dynamesh is that I just do whatever works at the time. Like, I might be in Dynamesh, I might be on a subtool that I've subdivided, you know, 8 times. And as long as the surface is doing what I want it to do, I just keep working on it. I don't really concern myself with if I'm in Dynamesh or not. It's just if I'm in Dynamesh and stuff starts looking like wonky or the lines aren't clean, then I'll Z-remesh it, and I'll, you know, get that nice and clean, and then I'll subdivide it a lot so that I can get it clean and nice. And but at the end of the day, everything has to be Dynamesh to make it watertight. And that's another, I didn't pull it out aside here, but there have been projects in the past where actually I do have this one. I'll show this one real quick. This is one I did for McFarlane a long time ago. Ooh, that's bright. Okay.
That's a white background. There you go. Nice.
So this is Bucky from Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Right? Lots of feathers and, you know, lots of details, right?
Yeah.
When we started on this, it was more of a statue. Like, it's like we weren't sure what it was going to be. So he was sculpted in pose. So he was actually like, these arms were down, the legs were down, and he was in a standing kind of, you know, head up, you know, pose with his wings back. Yeah. And then, like, I turned it in for approval, and then they came back with, okay, actually, we want it articulated now. And few things are more difficult than taking something that was sculpted in pose and then going and trying to articulate it and make it look nice. But one of the issues, and the reason I open it, is that all this detail in here, I did all this stuff, and we get to the end, and I send it in for approval, and everything was great. They liked it, licensor liked it, it was cool. But when they did the prototype, you couldn't see any of the feather detail. Like, it was just it was too light, because one, it was the scale was smaller, and, you know, honestly, I should have known better. Like, it was just one of those things, as I'm working, I just didn't consider that I may not be carving in hard enough, heavy enough. But yeah, but this was one of those things, when I tried to carve in deeper, it was giving me a lot of noise and a lot of it just wasn't giving me clean lines. So I had to go back, I had to duplicate my wings, and make a copy, Z-remesh it, get a nice clean surface, reproject, clean up the projection as much as I could, and then go back in until I had, you know, multiple millions of points to play with, and sculpt on top of that to get it to the level that it needed to get. And I know you guys now have the that contrast slider.
Yeah, we have the contrast slider. There's also another method I'm really, really fond of, which is turning on a layer, and then during that layer, smooth it down a lot, and then turn it back off, and then slide that layer the other direction. and that usually bumps it up too. But yeah, we have contrast brushes. We also have a contrast slider and deformation, which will help with that. But I mean, if there's already really sharp edges, the contrast slider will actually kind of crunch them a little bit more. So just be a little careful on that. But the contrast brush, we have Delta and and then the other one that really just helps keep it that really helps kind of let you paint it, the details a little bit more, so you can control how much you want, and you can control which spots. So we made a brush version and then a slider version.
Yeah. And I've used that since on some projects, but for this one was before the contrast slider, and it was just this rush job to get it done in time. But yeah, that, I mean, topology is important to a point, and then you know, it's all about just getting the results you need. There's no hard and fast rule, at least how I work when it comes to that stuff.
No, that's good to know. That provides a little bit of freedom too with the artist, and let them kind of, you know, feel free to create and then explore afterwards. So I've always been an advocate of create first, then worry about the trouble stuff later. Yeah. This is a cool piece. Who'd you do this for?
Yeah, this was a statue for Pulp Culture Shock. I did years ago, and I only pulled it up because I just really like it. there's no real reason. I just really like it. But it was a cool combination of doing that kind of the clean animated style Storm Shadow, jumping over the ATV, and then having to go down here and do this real mechanical, you know, bits, like even down to like the shocks and stuff down here in the you know, in the gravel and whatnot, buried down in there, and just different details and stuff like that. And
it's a lot of details, but in the right spots, it just pops so well.
Yeah. I have it on my shelf over here. It's you know, it's a quarter scale, so of all the stuff I've ever done, it did ultimately become the largest piece I've ever worked on.
Nice.
Which it's real gratifying to see that, to have that, you know, sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah, that looks fantastic.
Oh yeah, I got some engine stuff back here, and yeah, I'm pretty sure I did it all. This may not even be the final one. I think there's some engine detail missing, but anyway, yeah, I think I did all of this in. Did I do all this in ZBrush? I think I did. Nice. I used to kind of bounce around a little bit to do some basic things in like Maya, but I try to stay in ZBrush as much as humanly possible these days.
We try to keep artists in ZBrush as much as possible.
You might have incentive to do so.
Yeah.
So I haven't had a ton of need to jump out of it very often, so anymore.
Yeah. So in the toy industry as a whole, what would you say is like the typical turnaround time from start to finish? You're given an articulated character. They say, "Hey, go for this." What's the lead time that you typically are given?
For work, for just my side of it, I'm anywhere from a month to 2 months usually. Is it'd be nice if they're done in the month, but sometimes notes. Sometimes we have a lot of projects going on, so there's like a backlog of notes and things that have to happen, and then other projects come in and they take precedent, and then you push, you know. But just a clean slate, usually a month is ideal.
Nice.
And then, you know, it takes about a year all around from the point I start to where it ends up on the shelf. So
that's cool.
And there's stuff, I mean, even at Comic-Con, like looking at the display at NECA, there was stuff on display that I'd never seen before, and I was like, why does that look familiar? And then I remembered that I sculpted it like 3 years ago or something like that.
That's right.
Like little things. And I was like, that's right, I did that at some point. And, this guy is, this was one of the, NECA had a Comic-Con exclusive, which was like a 4-pack, I think. Yeah, 4-pack. And this is Hamato, which is a Splinter from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in human form.
Yeah. Chat's raving right now.
Go. Yeah. So So yeah, he was cool to do, and it was cool for him to be part of the exclusive set. And you know, one thing that used to bum me out as a collector is, you know, like just to use the turtles as an example, you have Leonardo, Raphael, and Donatello, and then you have to go to a convention somewhere in like Emerald City to get Michelangelo. Like that doesn't seem fair, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's always good when you have something. I know that a lot of people want Hamato, a lot of people did, but he's not like, you know, he's not crucial for the shelf to the degree of where everyone in the world has to have him, but he's just a really cool piece that if you can get, then it's cool to get him.
Yeah.
And I think NECA tries to do that with a lot of their exclusives, you know.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. Well, we are going about an hour and a half right now. If anybody's tuning in for the first time, this is Brodie Perkins. We're talking toys and ZBrush and how those two things relate. So if you guys have any other questions for Brodie, feel free to jump it in. But you know, this has been amazing having you on and talking about articulation and breaking it down. It's really cool to see the different approaches that everyone takes while using ZBrush to create their products or their creations.
I mean, for me, and I'm not blowing smoke here, but I wouldn't be doing what I do if not for ZBrush, and not just because it enabled me to do something. It's like I said earlier, I went to school for animation. That's what I graduated in as a character animator.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried for years to be a character animator. And I worked at a lot of little jobs, but I never landed a job at like, you know, Pixar or ILM or any of those kind of big studios that I wanted to. And at some point, then ZBrush came out. And one of the things I used to struggle with my animation was modeling, any kind of box modeling, dealing with vertices, you know, all that kind of stuff in Maya. I just had a really hard time doing anything with characters. So I would always have to download these, you know, free models online as best I could, and then rig them and try to animate them and stuff like that. And I just hated it. I hated doing that. I hated like not having my own personal spin or touch on those characters. And then one year ZBrush came out, or at least I became aware of it. And suddenly I was back into like, I was sculpting, I was creating all these cool characters that were in my imagination, and I could just kind of make them happen. And it took all those kind of limitations off that I felt like I had before. And I went to, I remember that same year, I went to a interview. The school I went to was Savannah College of Art and Design, and they had some Pixar artists come to do portfolio reviews.
Yeah.
And so I took my demo reel over to, I went to show the Pixar people, because I was thinking like, trying to get into the animation industry for like 8 years now. It'd be really great if they love my stuff and I can walk away with a job. And so I go to this thing, and she looks at my reel. She gives me a couple of compliments about, you know, certain aspects of it. And then she's like, well, how long have you been, you know, doing this? And I was like, well, about 8 years, you know, not including college. And she's like, okay, well, so you're trying to be in the industry. And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to be, you know, an animator in the animation industry. Mm-hmm. And she said, and I wish I could remember this. I wish I could remember this person's name, because I would like to be able to contact her and thank her now. But I can't remember her name. But she said, well, I think part of the problem is that you're not an animator. And for someone for 8 years trying to be an animator to hear that was like getting punched in the stomach, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, you got all these characters that are detailed and look great. You know, you obviously took a lot of time working on all these characters. Looks like you spent 85% of your time modeling these characters, and maybe 15-20% of your time animating them. She goes, I think you're a character artist and you're not an animator. I think you're at least going off of this, what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And I had to go home and kind of sit with that a minute and realize that I think she's right. Like ZBrush made it exciting again to do this stuff that I'm doing. I had very little interest of sitting there and moving IK chains around and animating anymore. I just really didn't. I just wanted to make characters and sculpt and sculpt and sculpt. So like pretty much overnight, I made a career change, non-career change, because I didn't have a career at the time. And you know, a couple of years later, I'm at Comic-Con talking to the Four Horsemen and getting my first toy gig. So
That's awesome.
I don't think that would have happened if I would probably still be wondering why I can't get a job in the animation industry.
Yeah. No, sometimes it's helpful to get a final word or something, somebody saying something to you that just finally clicks, or at least in your case, it made you think about what it is you were doing and how you're approaching it. And yeah, finding that love for sculpting, it really just kind of helped change, your direction. I think that's really awesome.
Well, it made me realize what I was enjoying about the projects I was working on. It wasn't the animation; it was creating these characters. And like, okay, now I guess I'm going to have him. Now that I've spent like 3 weeks working on this guy, I guess I'll have him walk over here and drop a vase. Like what?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, what glove are you like? You have a glove that's popping up and down.
Yeah, dude. I recommend this is. I think it's Doki. DOKI.
Okay.
If they want to send me a sponsorship, I'll take it. I love these guys. I've used a bunch of other gloves. I have this one that I got from you guys a few years back, the ZBrush one. It's nice, it's nice. But what I like about the Doki one is it's got a little bit of a leather. It's not leather, but it's a nice, like, kind of a thicker material right here.
Yeah.
So it kind of it gives you just a little. It still glides smoothly, but it gives you just the slightest bit of resistance, and kind of cleans your screen while you work. And I don't know, I just like them. I like them a lot.
Yeah, I have a pair too. It's really nice. Very cool. Very cool.
Go for it.
Well, if anybody has any final questions, Brodie, do you have any final words you'd like to shout out to everybody? Advice? Tell them to just keep sculpting.
Sculpting, yeah. No, if anyone wants to. Any questions, ask. Hit me up on Instagram or something like that. I'll do my best to answer you.
Yeah. Well,
I do get a lot of questions about articulation, and I will say, the very first thing you need to do before you contact someone like me or anyone else about how to do articulation is buy some toys and break them apart, and at least do that. Knock that part out first, and then get to us with your questions about how to take it further. But that would be the one piece of advice I have.
That's awesome. No, actually, that answered a question that was coming up about how to train for joints and so forth. Yeah, break apart your toys, try them, look at them, try to replicate.
Not one you care about, but go buy one.
Yeah.
Like
Very cool.
And I'll say this: like, if you want to get in the toy industry, it is a small industry. It's one of those, you hear it a lot with a lot of other industries too. But I really feel like when I go to Comic-Con, I feel like I know most of the people. I have worked with a lot of people on the freelance end, but it just feels like everybody kind of knows everybody. The people are always looking for talent. But I will say, I think what helped me the most after, just even with Four Horsemen, but after Four Horsemen, and working with like Skybound and 3A and 3.0 and Hasbro and Mattel and all these other companies, was that I had articulation in my portfolio. So there are tons of sculptors out there that are brilliant sculptors that can run circles around me in their sleeve. And there are some studios that'll take them and just use those guys, and then they'll worry about the articulation themselves. But I think a lot of studios want to see that you know how to make a toy. If you can sculpt well and you know how to, you show that you can make an actual toy. Get a 3D printer and print it out and stuff like that. I think that's gonna our customizers. We have a couple of guys that are freelance for us regularly that are just amazing toy customizers. That's kind of how they start. They do incredible customizing, and they've got really big followings, and they're just really talented guys. And people like that catch. That's who gets people's attention. Nice.
Is NECA hiring at all? Yes, a few questions.
Not that I know of. I haven't seen any. But if there might be an email address on the website. I don't know.
Yeah, I would definitely say it never hurts to reach out, send your portfolio, introduce yourself, make that connection. They may not be hiring right this minute, but that doesn't mean that your resume or portfolio won't go across somebody's desk. So,
yeah. I think the biggest thing for me, and I know it's not easy, it's not something that everybody can do, but the biggest advantage or the biggest thing for me was just being physically at Comic-Con and meeting these people. Because everyone I've worked with, I met at Comic-Con. There's no one I just like sent my portfolio. I've never sent my portfolio somewhere and got an email back and said, yeah, you're hired. It's always been like, I've met these people, and there are a few people that got to know me through word of mouth because they've seen my work since then. But by and large, everyone I've worked with, it's because I talk to them every year at Comic-Con, got their business cards, and then bothered them until I broke down their will to live, and they eventually hired me.
Nice. Do you do any shelling or of your own on the toys that you work on, or is that outputted somewhere? Shelling, like, you know, making the hollowing out the models, is that more on the production side?
Not really. Yeah, that's more production side.
Yeah.
Nice. That was one of the stressors when I started working in the industry. I thought I was going to have to figure out how to, you know, because if you break open the torso of an action figure, it's got these all little kind of support structures and carved out. And as far as any company I've ever like worked for, I've never had to do that. So
nice.
Not saying they wouldn't like me to. I just never been asked to, and thank God.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. All right, we got like one more question. Actually, there's a second part of that last question too. Millimeters, inches. How do you export your models?
Millimeters usually, but depends on the client. You know. Yeah. Hong Kong deals in millimeters usually.
Yeah.
So that's the most consistent. But for years, I would do in inches, and then they would figure it out. But sometimes you do run into issues where, especially depending on the software you use to like finalize your files, sometimes you'll import it in, and it'll import that into inches instead of millimeters. So you've got a piece that's like massive, and then you got like pieces that are tiny, and then client's like, what's going on? And you're like, well, somebody changed the measurement on one piece and didn't change it on the rest, and now we got to go back and figure that out. So
exactly, yeah. I always say, especially if you're 3D printing, but most of the time it's going to be millimeters. If anybody remembers, 25.4 millimeters is equal to 1 inch. Makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, I think rule of thumb, just do millimeters, and you won't go wrong. You're not going to run into someone saying, "Where's the inches?"
Yeah. All right, last question. This is probably a tough one. You ready for it? Ready? Here we go. Have you ever wanted to create your own toy line?
Yeah, all the time. Probably more so when I wasn't making them as a living. Yeah. I mean, it'd be great. Like, I have ideas. Like, everyone has ideas. I have all these ideas. It'd be great if like Randy over at NECA called me into a meeting and was like, Brodie, I really want to know your ideas. We're going to put all the financial power of NECA behind whatever you spit out. And then I would be like, that'd be great. But
yeah. One day. You never know.
Yeah, no, I have ideas and stuff, but honestly, like these days, the idea of I'm a little less motivated to do that kind of thing. There's other creative outlets that are more appealing to me, because I do what I love for a living, but there's only so much doing what I love I can do in a day before I start losing my mind. So I try to find other things to kind of put my energy into.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brodie, for coming on. It's been a pleasure to talk with you, chat toys, and also see an articulated process. If anybody's just tuning in or will watch this on the VOD and you made it this far, thank you for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. Again, we are actually doing an Ask Live ZBrush next Tuesday with me and Paul Gabry, so you're going to want to tune in for that. It's August 23rd at 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time here in the Los Angeles, California, Sunshine State. So you're going to want to tune in for that. Again, thank you guys thank you again, Brodie, for showing up. Thank you, audience, for showing up. It's been awesome. And we'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.